Well, good morning, everybody. All right, here's my plan for the forecast video today. Matt brought up something really quite important yesterday, and he was talking about this pattern adjustment, this pattern flip that's going to be happening in the beginning of June, and it's brewing right now in the Pacific Ocean. I'm going to ask a bigger question based off of the discussions we had yesterday. We've had an interesting spring with respect to both the temperature and precipitation pattern. And many of us across the country are extremely familiar with, and we remember major pattern flips that happen on like a seasonal scale. And I want to talk about that and what the risks might be going forward and just make a case for what we need to be aware of. All right. Now, certainly the last 7 days have been quite cold if you've been in the Midwest, upper Midwest, Plains, Great Lakes states, Northeast, while it's been very hot down south, and the temperatures are cranking in the West right now. This crop in this section of the country needs heat, right? We need to get some heat back on this. We have some good news. Some of that's coming through, but I want to show you something. Through this Labor Day weekend, it has been not Labor Day, forgive me, Memorial Day weekend. Just looking back over the last 7 days, this is one of the coldest such stretches. Okay, so we're looking at May 19th to May 27th, coldest such stretches in history of our weather data here, going back to 1893. And there it is. There's the ranks. Now, meanwhile, Texas, Louisiana, all the way to Florida, very, very hot. The Southwest has been very hot, and it's getting much hotter. But it's just interesting to see this. This is not the kind of start you want on a crop in these areas. You want to pack in the heat units early to get that crop to jump out of the ground. But as I told you all last week, I love going to the Indy 500. I'm going to be honest with you. That Apache helicopter flyover thing just sent chills. It was incredible to watch that. But I go with a group of guys and their families, actually, that have been going to the Indy 500 for a long time. And when I got there, I was talking to one of those guys. His name's Jeff. Jeff's like, man, this reminds me of 1992. Now, me being the big nerd that I am, I have all the data going back to 1992. But he said something interesting right at the beginning of the Indy 500, which was when we saw one of the racers, who shall remain unnamed, spin out in the parade lap. And he goes, yeah, this happened in 1992. And sure enough, you go back and look up, and Roberto Guerrero, he was famous pole sitter, but he crashed on the parade lap. And you started to see a lot of these headlines showing up that said, sloppy start to the 109th, shades of 1992. And we got to talking about this. And the question is 1992, all right, since it was so cold on Memorial Day, is it an analog for 2025? So I went back and just started digging around on some of the data. So this is just a graphic of temperatures. If I can blow this up to make it a little easier to see there. This is a graphic of daily highs and lows that I've been working on. And Memorial Day weekend was right here where they had highs, barely getting in the mid 50s. So right in through there was that cold stretch. Now, later on that season, now this is again for Speedway, we're right here. We didn't get exceptionally hot throughout the summer. In fact, that particular summer, while it was dry early, it got very wet in the month of July. See this major recovery in moisture as we got into the month of July. You actually finished the year wet over in Indianapolis. Now, is that an analog to this year? Well, I have, of course, this year in the data set. So if we just come up here and go right to 2025, this is what 2025 looks like. And it's just a coincidence that it looks like this. This particular year is not an analog. And if you're curious, that's how the precipitation has shaped up since the beginning of the new year, with extremely wet conditions back there in April. That brought them up from a very dry go of it here early in the season to where they are now. All right. Now, 1992 ended up finishing very wet right across this entire corridor. And that is something that we're not anticipating here. And I want to show you why, okay? In 1992, the end of May, this is what the ocean temperatures look like. Now, we don't have this at all, right? Right now, we've got something more like this. That's May 26th. We've got this negative PMM, this dying, decaying La Nina effect here with the cooler ocean temperatures, occasional strong trade winds, very warm conditions in the Central Pacific. In 1992 look like this. So no, just because the Indy 500 was cold this year does not mean that 1992 is going to be an analog. But I just kind of want to let you know what we do when we go looking for these things, all right? So when we think all of this through, I want to bring up this idea. We're watching again today. This is just a new radar product I'm working on for you that just looks across the country at yet another slow-moving low-pressure system. It has had a history of producing more severe weather down south, very wet conditions now east, and quite a bit of heavy rain is moving right through my backyard here. We just got a new radar image in there, right into this section of the country. And as we just think about where this is all going and where it's been lately, we've had a lot of spring rain. I mean, this is even hitting some areas that have been really dry. I mean, this is the last 10 days. We hit Nebraska with desperately needed rain. Parts of Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all very dry, needed the rain. The flooding has been here, and this has been well forecast by the models. And this is now the third time this spring that region has been hit hard with rain. We got rain over into the east, which is an area that was in drought earlier, and it's being relieved. Our driest spot, which this is climatologically consistent, meaning that it's normal, has been in this region. We're going to wait on the summer monsoon to start to revive that pattern. So just thinking it through, right? This is where we've been since April 1. And we've had drier conditions kind of in a stripe, right? We've kind of tried to draw this a few times. It's kind of this stripe in through here where on either side it's been extremely wet. And I want to talk to you about this because is this what we anticipated May to look like? For me, no, it wasn't. And I thought I was pretty clear about that in my forecast videos. It wasn't until we got a couple of weeks out from each of these heavy rainfall events that have gone through the Mid-South, sections of the lower Mississippi River Valley, getting over to the Red River Valley, and then down here in the southeast, that we really saw the potential for the pattern to do this. And I want to tell you why, and then I'm going to tell you why this is important to me to take this, but put it into some sort of historical context for you. So let's do that, okay? First of all, I want to show you this. Since the beginning of May, what's the jet stream done? I think we nailed this, right? You heard us talk repeatedly about the loss of momentum in the flow and the movement of the jet stream to the north. Now, where is it? If you look at the 500 millibar geopotential height, so these are the troughs and ridges, the jet always goes in between them. So it wanted to do that. Now, normally when we see the jet stream with this kind of behavior, all right, it is not overly common such that we would have forecasted it to see repeated troughs of low pressure, cut-off lows, moving slowly through this area. But that's what happened. I anticipated that when the jet stream took on this configuration, we would just build a larger ridge in this area, not having repeated cutoff lows with large wind fields, slow-moving systems, repeated outbreaks of severe weather from the plains through the Midwest, down south. I mean, this last 10 days has been incredibly active for severe weather. And I missed that. That is something that you would have asked me about this back in April or even March. I'd have been, no, I think we're going to get this. But here's how close things were, okay, to really having problems in the month of May. Just that same time period, we had the Pacific high sitting here, all right? We had the Bermuda high, part of it there. There was higher pressure up here toward Ireland, over toward Iceland, and a piece of kind of this Atlantic high that broke off into this part of Canada. Now, what was interesting about that configuration is just this piece right in through there. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Let me take these drawings off here and restart this. Had this high pressure cell been a bit farther over here in its center, the likelihood of this not being here, but instead joining that or joining that is pretty high. And then had that occurred, this would have been much more expansive. It doesn't matter either way. If you push the high over here, this would have grown. If you had pushed the high there, it would have grown. And it would have expanded into the central United States. And we would have been talking about the Central Plains, the Midwest, Upper Midwest, the Mid-South, that whole region, the Corn Belt, the Soybean Belt, talking about hot, dry conditions. But instead, things stayed in this configuration. And it kind of just hints at the kind of unpredictability of these kind of events. And that right there has been the toughest thing to kind of get. So what did the jet stream winds look like? Okay, there they go. This is the anomalous jet stream level winds. Look how strong they were in this area. And look right there. That's that big high. But that was the supportive piece almost born on some subtropical flow that just helped, keep these little, well, not little, they were huge, cut off slow-moving lows going underneath the bigger feature to the north. Now, thinking that through, that bigger feature to the north in Canada has caused some problems. This is sunrise this morning, and you're in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And as you look here, and also Ontario, look at the smoke this morning spreading in this area. I'm going to go backward. This is last night. These are the heat signatures from the fire in the infrared. And let's go back to the day before, and just started at the beginning of the day. There's sunrise yesterday. Look at the wildfire smoke just continuing to pour out of the forested areas here north of the Canadian prairie. just covering the skies in a tremendous amount of smoke. And some of the smoke over the weekend moved all the way down into Minnesota, the Dakotas, and a tendril of it even made it down into the central states of the U.S. But south of this, we've got this guy. And yesterday, this just monster of a low, slow moving, there it goes, put out some deep storms in Florida, needed those. Heavy rains down here in the southeast. This is a pocket that's been quite wet as of late, so this has been a bit problematic. More large storms exploding back here in pockets of the southern plains, and several of them producing flooding rains coming out of parts of Colorado. And this is a really dry spot here. We need to get this in. And meanwhile, we're watching California heat up in a big way. In fact, take a look at the cloud field, telling you what the upper level flow is doing. It's coming like this off the Sierra Nevada mountains. Watch as I rock back and forth. And that's what's going to help heat that Central Valley of California up in a big way. Now, all of that being said, the next 15 days, if you're just curious, this is the chance at grabbing another inch of rain in the next 2 weeks, which, by the way, gets us out to June 12th. And you could say, well, is it going to be a little drier on the Great Lakes? Possibly. But we're still wet here. We're wet here. Look at this. We got better chances of moisture coming in from Montana and Wyoming through the northern plains. Is there a risk of drier in through here? Yes. But overall, you look at this pattern, and many are asking like, hey, wasn't there a discussion about drought, for this summer? And there still is. Okay, there still is a discussion about it. And this comes back to my earlier point about what patterns can do. Because even though out there, June 4th through 10th, we see the models once again going after the 4th, 5th, and 6th on a bigger system rolling through this area, delivering a bunch of rain, I still think there's evidence of dryness later. What's going to create this, by the way, is the Pacific jet. It's already stacking up 1, 2, 3 deep lows. And if you come out here and look at the upper level height, yesterday, Matt talked all about this jet extension that's coming through. That's going to drive itself through the U.S. and develop this system for us that early next week is going to just go tearing through the upper Midwest. And that's why the Climate Prediction Center is keeping an eye on the risk of heavy rains in this area. But this is what I want to talk about, all right? If we come back to, where was it? This one? Yeah. We come back to this. We've had a discussion about disparity in the precipitation patterns. It's been a discussion about the really, really wets and the really, really dries for the most part this spring. And I want to tell you something that in the last 3 years, how have things shaped up? This was May 8th through June 27th of 2023. This was that smoky, very dry, Great Lakes states, Midwestern states, into the Northeast. That's that super dry spring where all the heaviest rains were down south with all the severe storms, and then they lined, the Rocky Mountains here. It was also very dry in the Northwest. So again, what was going on was a large area of high pressure planted in like this. And the flow came around it. So what did it do? Down here, we were met with flow coming off the Gulf and off the Atlantic, so it stormed. Here, you're just pushing the flow upslope, creating huge complexes of thunderstorms. And then we've reversed the rain shadow effect over into, coastal Oregon and Washington. Now, that was May 8th through June 27th of 2023. This is what happened from June 28th to September 1. Now, if I were in Minnesota, parts of Iowa, we still stayed dry. But look at the massive pattern flip that happened here, right? And California is super wet. No monsoon in the south. So just look, this is the following time period after that was spring. And I don't need to remind many of you of 2024. May through June 30th, the wettest in these states. We were extremely dry in parts of Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, coastal parts of the Carolinas, very dry out west. Big storms in the Central Plains. This was last spring. And then we got into last fall. And we just saw, wet back on the Appalachian Mountains, but very dry still here, dry in the Northeast. Huge section of the major river systems in the middle part of the country went extremely dry last fall. And so my point behind telling you all of this is that when you see this graphic, which again is this year, these ranks, understand that we can, as we move into summer, completely change this. This does not mean that all of summer is going to be soaking wet here. And I was just talking yesterday with a good friend of mine who lives in, in Nashville. And he's like, I always feel like we're a week away from drought, even when we have all this flooding. So it's just a reminder that pattern flips can happen. And I want to make a case here for what we're going to have to continue to watch, because the Climate Prediction Center, they released this on May 15th. They continue, even though there's been heavy rains in some of these areas, especially right here. They still have this area under the risk of developing drought as we go forward into the heart of summer. And we can back this up with, forecast evidence. Is it set in stone? No, not even close. To be completely transparent with all of you, if I knew exactly how this summer weather was going to shape up, I wouldn't tell you. And that's not me being a jerk. That's me being smart. If I had that kind of clairvoyance and understanding, I'd be doing the right thing here, and I'd go up and sell everything I own, and I would put it all on a position in the markets on what the weather could do to, anything that's weather sensitive, and then I'd retire. So let's be transparent here. We do not fully understand yet if the atmosphere is capable of doing this, but there's just some evidence that it could. And we have to watch it to see if there's any evidence to overturn that. Okay, that's my main point behind showing you what I just showed you. So yeah, the drought monitor has shrunk. Just take a look at the last month or so. I've got over here the class change, and over here is the current monitor. Everywhere that you see these shades of color, that's where in the last 4 weeks we've seen improvement in the drought. That includes a big chunk of the northern plains, the southern plains, the southeast up through the mid-Atlantic. But there's been some degradation in a few key areas as well. We can't ignore that. But it's just to make the point that there's still a lot that is yet to be settled about the way the rest of this year is going to go. And the last 2 years have given us some sort of precedent in understanding that there can be massive seasonal flip-flops. And that's what I want to think about in this particular part of this forecast video. All right, so it's a little after 6:30 a.m. and we're watching heat issues, heat advisories out in California, Central Valley, all the way to the coast. We've got some dense fog issues in the middle part of the country, some heavy rains down south, still flooding on all these rivers down here. And we're asking ourselves where this is all going in the near term. Severe weather-wise, today, the day one outlook from the Storm Prediction Center continues to watch the southern plains for severe storms. Day two is along the south, the Gulf Coast as well. Day three is over in the Carolinas. And if we just take a look at kind of what's going on here, this is it. So the jet's coming in. It's still split, so there's pretty large ridge there. But these are these features that keep sneaking in under the main branch of the jet, which is way up here. They're going to continue to cause these issues going forward. But this is new. A big, long streak in the jet. We haven't seen that for weeks. And as that comes through, we just are curious if that's going to usher in something a bit different going forward. All right. So let's keep on the narrative here. High-res NAM model. I actually think it was a pretty well initialized model this morning. You saw the radar a moment ago. This is kind of what things look like. So let's play it forward. We watch rains move through the Northeast, through the Great Lakes states, storms in the Central Plains. We then play this out through the overnight hours tonight. Be very aware of the risk of straight-line wind damage plus some hail and isolated tornadoes here. We then watch this into tomorrow morning, getting out there to Thursday afternoon and evening, and just still more moisture coming in around this low that's just slowly moving itself off to the north and east. From there, we can go look at both of the models. And remember, as Matt talked about yesterday, we're going to watch one system get out. There it is by Thursday into Friday. Watch it just press east, bringing all that wetter weather here. We get some drier air coming in on the backside of this. But as we get into Saturday and Sunday, watch the west. This is where this next low comes in, as one deep one exits through the Canadian Maritimes. Are the models in agreement on timing and location? No. This is out here by June 1st, but June 2nd and 3rd and 4th. Look at the low that's coming out of Wyoming, Colorado, into the Dakotas. Well, we're questioning, and we're going to continue to provide more details on this. Are we sourcing air from here, or are we going to be able to source air from here? This would be dry, and this, of course, would be very moist. And that will tell us how far down the line we're going to build these storms. Yesterday, we didn't expect that. No good moisture return out of this. But some of the models are attempting to bring in some more moisture. But do you notice here, by the time you get to next Wednesday, that system cranked through, and then where's the rest of it? Like, where's all this kind of is pulled out of the forecast from the European model? So we look at all of that, and we've already assessed, kind of what precipitation patterns look like right now. But maybe let's just do this. I'm going to go back to ag weather real quick, and we're going to come down here to 7-day precip, so you can kind of see all of the models lined up. And maybe what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and play out the ECMWF totals, all right, just to kind of get a sense of this. So that's through the end of this week into the weekend, right? There you are from the European model. We then play this forward till that system comes out here. It is Monday into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. See that? Just ripping through there. And that gets you out to 10 full days. Now, over those 10 days, there are some pockets that are drier according to the European ensemble. They're this section of the Canadian prairie. They're much of the west. They're pockets right in through here which just recently saw extremely heavy rainfall and bits and pieces of the eastern Corn Belt as well. All right, so this is the chance of staying under a half inch of total accumulated precipitation. From there, though, I do want to show you that the pattern looks something like this as we work our way out into next week. And you're going, all right, show me what I need to see here. I'm just going to tell you, I think the model loses its signal right about there, right about day 10. After that low goes through, next, what is it, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, there it is. We don't see a strong signal after that. So maybe is the European right on that time frame? This is the June 5th through 11th time frame. Again, remembering that the Climate Prediction Center is also watching for heavy rains in this area. Yeah, but I think that's just the system that's out there that comes into the west on the 1st and 2nd and ejects 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th into this area. After that, I think we kind of lose a bit of the signal. Temperature-wise, it's kind of nice to say we don't see, look at the frost map, finally away from this risk in certain places. But we still have some colder air here. And I do want to apologize for something. If you were watching my website over the weekend, into early this week, and you kept seeing weird temperature graphs, I made a mistake in the coding, and I forgot to turn the data download back on after I was correcting some things. It's fine now. The NDFD is right again, but this is Thursday's highs getting into Friday. Look at this heat coming into the west. We might crack 110 degrees in places in California's Central Valley on Friday. Still hot into Saturday as well in the west. That's that big ridge coming in there. And then that heat starts to pour here by next Monday as the warm sector opens up for that system that's coming through next Monday, Tuesday. And we need every ounce of heat we can get on the crop in this area. If you look at the next 5 days and then compare it to day 5 through 10, there's that warmth coming back into the upper Midwest, which has been so cold. Much cooler weather in the west with the trough that's dipping in there. And then you see day 10 through 15. This is what I want to know about. Do we return more warm weather here? And if we do, and that presses on toward the south and east, if warm weather comes in, this is another indication of more northerly position of the jet, which would indicate that after we get through the first week of June, we could be looking at a drier week 2, week 3, week 4 of June. But I'm not even settled in that. So let's kind of make a case for this. This is the forecast that was updated from the CPC on Friday. They're looking at June 7th through June 20th. And again, you start to see that similar look. Are we going to watch dryness come in here and start to build while we stay wet down farther to the south and east? Heat comes in indicating a ridge. That's why I think you can move this dryness in this direction. That's a hard, forecast to pin down right now, given that we don't even have a good signal out into week 2. So let's take a look at a couple of things that can help with this analysis. One, I'm curious about the MJO's true position and strength. We've seen the spaghetti plots just look like a mess, but floating around here between phase 5, 6, and 7 in the more extended forecast, whereas the European ensemble short range is trying to take it out fully into phase 7. Now, what's interesting about that is I went just looking at velocity potentials, and Matt's been showing you those Hofmüller diagrams. This is another example of that. And what I find fascinating is these anomalies right here and right here. Now, he's been talking about these convectively coupled Kelvin waves, right? Moving off of the main source of rising motion in our atmosphere, which is there. We're seeing something come across to suppress that in this area in the next 15 days, and this is where the best rising motion's going. And I got to thinking about this, okay? And I'm like, all right, if I see something like that taking shape, what does that do in June to the midsection of the country? Because if we can diagnose the midsection, we can see how the coasts are gonna respond. So I went out and created a time series looking at June for the primary corn and soybean belt. So think of this as the central U.S. through the Midwest. And I wanted to know June precipitation. So this is every year you've got. And then you can come down here. This is a beautiful thing about this website. You can rank it. So there's the driest, there's the going from 1895 to present, and you click it again, it'll give you the wettest, right? So I went out and looked at all of that, and this is what I found. Here's your driest Junes. In the driest Junes, the best rising motion was out here in phase 7 and 8, and a whole lot of sinking motion there, which is, off the coast of Central America. Sinking motion over, Indonesia as well. So let's do something here. We have got sinking motion moving into phase 7 and 8, not rising motion. We have the best rising motion there. So you're saying, okay, if you purely use the MJO as your indicator, these super dry Junes are not in the forecast right now, based off of what you just saw. On the flip side of that, very wet Junes have the best rising motion here and there, and sinking motion here and here. And we are closer to this than we are the really, really hot, dry Junes. And I think that's one of the big reasons why the newest outlook for June from the European model looks something like this. So it's got, now again, that analysis we just did was for this whole region, okay? And you now see better than average precip for most of it. Now, could we still be talking about drier in here? Could we talk about the risk that area gets warmer too? Yes, I still think that's all in the cards. But it seems as though we're going to stay relatively stormy based off this one approach to understanding the forecast. Now, convectively coupled Kelvin waves, all right, tend to really perturb the pattern. They bring in a major shift, and then often right after them, there's a big flop back to something different. So, moral of the story, this is a big disruptive event. It seems to be complementing that, like following this. And I think that afterward, we should be watching out for something entirely different than what the models are suggesting for the month of June, primarily in the precipitation field. And my support for that isn't just from that analysis and my own intuition. My support from it also comes from this map from Tropical Tidbits. We still have, compared to the global mean right now, today's global mean, very cold water there and very warm water here. And no, it's not like 1992. And there's an indication that getting into late June, July, and August, that this starts to produce drier conditions within this region. And the temperatures tend to come up as well. And again, we're in the middle of this 40-day assignment of watching the cold water in this region. And if it continues to show up, then that's a bigger indicator. So, something to think about. I want to finish with one last piece here, and I'm going to take you halfway around the world, because I noticed how cold the water was here. And what's very interesting about this is we're all anticipating an active Indian monsoon. And I was watching, do you see the subcontinent here? Watch over the next 15 days. Watch right here, okay? Pushing into India, we just see this look at the wind, just persistent wind. Look at that, over the next 15 days, screaming out of this area. Now, what's interesting about it is there's actually not a whole lot of really humid air yet in this region. So you'd think we'd have a really active go of the Indian monsoon, but instead, I don't want to show it to you that way. Let's come back here. Let's just look at total precip. What we get is precip adding up along the coast, but it's actually not that wet. Now, it's extremely wet down here, but what an interesting view of the way that flow is coming into other parts of the world. Now, by the way, in this 15-day forecast, there's the Black Sea. Ukraine's expected to get precip, but we're drier here, getting over toward Kazakhstan, which has had some really strong dry winds as of late. Turkey's quite wet. We can see that if you kind of get yourself oriented, here is the Manchurian Plain, the North China Plain. They're looking halfway decent on precip. And the models flip-flop back and forth every day on what's happening along the Mayu front, which is what provides the Yangtze River with its rains this time of year. Right now, the GFS went back over wet. So we'll continue to kind of look at all of this. In the meantime, always just go to my site. Go to agweather.com. You're like, I need to see that again. We'll come over here and choose Asia. Pick your model. I don't care. I picked the European this time. And you can see all of these things. You can add them up and look at them yourself and play around with the website. I hope you do that. But now you know what we're thinking about midweek. Matt and Andrew and I are going to put our heads together again later today and just keep this story going, and we'll continue to assess the risk. But you all have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.